Today I'll be sewing up the Katy pattern from LittleLizardKings, and I thought I would take you along and just show you how this dress is made. It is beautiful and comes together very, very nicely. I am starting off by doing an embroidery design on the front of my bodice, but of course this is just optional, and here are the pieces you're going to need for this project. We are getting started by taking the ruffle piece for the sleeve and taking the longer edge, and we're going to hem it up 1/4 of an inch and then hem it up another 1/4 of an inch. Give this a good iron, and then we're going to top stitch and do 2 rows of basting stitches on the other side. Here I am doing the top stitch on that hem, and then I'm going to take my longest stitch length on my machine, which is a 7, and do my basting stitches on the other side by just doing 2 rows of long stitches that I can gather later. Repeat this for both of your sleeve pieces. Taking the sleeve main piece, I folded it in half to find the center and mark the center of the ruffle piece. Now on the longer edge, I'm going to match those center pieces just like this, and then I'm going to pin the edges on both sides, and then we need to take the 2 top threads and pull together until this is evenly gathered. The pin in the center helps with this process. Also, the ruffle is right sides touching the main sleeve piece. When I have it ruffled to the perfect size, I take my threads and I do a figure 8 around that pin. That way the ruffle does not move and it is locked in place. Both sleeve pieces should now be ruffled, and we're going to go and base stitch this ruffle down using a 3/8 seam allowance, and then we're going to take the lining piece right sides touching like a sandwich, and we are going to top stitch this or sew this together using our seam allowance, which is a 1/2 inch. So we're going to sew a 1/2 inch on the longer side. Now we need to take our pinking shears and we need to trim down the seam allowance to about 1/4 of an inch. Then we're going to move the ruffle out of the way on the inside and sew the other side, making sure not to catch that ruffle piece. Once again, trim away that seam allowance, and then we can turn it right side out and repeat the same process on the other sleeve piece. Give this a good iron. Take your main front pieces and we're going to put them right sides touching and sew the top using our seam allowance, a 1/2 inch, and then we're going to cut down that seam allowance as well, and then open it up and put our sleeve piece right sides touching, matching it right up to that seam, and then we're going to base stitch and repeat the same thing for the other sleeve. Match it right up to that seam and baste it in place. I'm using a 3/8 of an inch basting stitch. This does not have to be secure, it's just to hold it in place. Then we're going to take the lining piece and fold it right on over like a sandwich, right sides touching, and sew using our seam allowance, which is a 1/2 inch. Repeat on both sides. Making sure we trim down that seam allowance as well. Taking our back main, we need to put some interfacing on the back piece, that way it can hold up our buttonholes, and we're going to put our lining pieces right sides touching and sew along the top right there, and then trim down that seam allowance as well, and repeat the same process we did from the front by opening it up and putting our sleeve pieces right sides touching right along that seam, and we're going to do a basting stitch and then repeat on the other side. Remember, this is just a basting stitch, so we don't have to secure it in place. We're just holding it down, and then we're going to flip that right on over, right sides touching like a sandwich, and sew using our seam allowance, which is a 1/2 inch. It should look like this, and now we're going to sew the center back by flipping them right sides touching and sew down each of these sides right here using our seam allowance. Now lay your bodice right sides up and flip that lining upwards, and then match the lining in the front piece right sides like this and sew down the side seam. Once you have that sewn, we're just going to flatten out our seam and then lay it nicely together. That way it lies nice and flat. Now put your bodice right side facing down, and we're going to be looking at the wearer's right hand side right here, and we're going to measure and mark 3/4 of an inch with some chalk or a marking pin. This is how much the bodice will overlap when you do the buttonholes. So I made that mark, and then that's how it's going to overlap, just like that. Now, on the left-hand side, that is where we're going to put the buttonholes. So we're going to lay that down, and I'm going to measure 1/4 of an inch off the edge like this. That way I know exactly where to put my buttonholes, and then we're going to mark where the buttons go. This is the part that I normally hold my breath and just hope that my machine acts right and does these buttonholes for me perfectly. Because for some reason, this is the only part that likes to give me trouble, and my machine likes to not do a proper buttonhole. But it did perfect, so now I'm going to reach in and mark where my buttons are going to go, and then hand sew those on. I might switch these out for clear later, I'm not sure. Move the bodice to the side, and we're going to work on the ruffle pieces of the skirt. I like to do French seams, so I'm putting them wrong sides touching, sewing 1/4 of an inch, cutting off the seam allowance, and then sewing another 1/4 of an inch with it right sides touching, and this will enclose the raw edge so that no raw edges is exposed. And I'm going to do this for all the ruffle pieces. Now that we have a big old loop, we need to go and serge or finish off the bottom raw edge. I'm not doing any cutting off, I'm just serging it. That way I have a perfect 1/4 inch in order to fold it over and fold it over again to hem it. And then on the top, we need to do 2 rows of basting stitches in order to gather later. Taking the skirt pieces, putting them wrong sides touching, and doing a French seam just like the ruffle pieces, and making my skirt piece. Repeat the same process for the longer skirt that goes underneath, and then we need to gather the ruffles, putting them right sides touching the skirt piece, and sew and finish off that seam. And then I like to top stitch, but here are our 2 skirts. Now we're just going to put them right on top of each other, and we're going to pin the back piece. That way both layers of the skirts are together. I have the center of that skirt marked. That way this is easier, because now I'm going to mark on that center line 2.5 inches down, and then I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch all the way around like a box, and then I'm going to go and stitch this box. That way it holds the 2 skirt pieces together, and this will make making the placket so much easier, because now we are just cutting into it, making sure we don't cut those stitches, and then taking our placket piece, we're going to take the placket piece right sides touching the wrong side of the skirt, and sew 1/4 of an inch all the way down. All we should have to do is pull that placket straight and sew straight down. There should be no puckers or anything. It should just be straight. Now we're going to fold that placket 3/4 of an inch down, and then fold it down again and top stitch. Now on the wearer's left side, we're going to fold that placket under and do a little basting stitch just to hold it backwards. So we're going to go ahead and gather these 2 skirts right here and attach them to our bodice. We are going to do 2 rows of basting stitches starting from the side seam. In the front, do 2 rows from side seam to side seam, and then on the back we're going to do 2 rows from the side seam to the placket, and then side seam to the placket. Do not stitch over your placket. Since this is the double layered skirt, we're going to gather each skirt separately. So we're going to do the basting stitches on the top skirt of the main, and then on the bottom. To do a basting stitch, you turn your machine on the longest stitch length. Mine goes to 7, but every machine is different, so just choose the longest stitch length on your machine. Now we're doing our basting stitches. We do not do a back stitch to lock it in place. We want to keep it unlocked, that way we can pull the threads together. And then here's the placket and here's the under skirt. We only want to do each skirt separately, so I'm pulling that to the back. And we do not want to stitch on the placket, so I'm starting right above the placket right here. We're going to do 1/4 of an inch from the edge of the fabric here, and then go to the side seam. And we're going to go back to the beginning and do a second row of the same kind of stitches, and then we're going to go and do the same thing to the underskirt. I like to always put a notch in the center of my bodice. That way I can line up my notch that's on the center of my skirt, and I know exactly where the center is. We're going to go ahead and start by attaching the main skirt, the top skirt, to the bodice all the way around, and then we're going to come back and gather the inner skirt and attach it to the bodice. We're gonna start gathering now. So we found either 2 top threads or 2 bottom threads. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab them and we're gonna start gathering. What I like to do is I like to over gather. So I know that's way too much. I lay my threads down and then I will walk my fabric along the edge. And if it needs a little bit more, then I'll just pull it out. But this looks like it actually needs gathered a little bit more. So I'm just gonna gather it a little bit more like that. And then I'm gonna go and do a figure 8 around my pin. So I'm gonna take my threads and go around, under, around, under, around, under. Do this a couple times. That way your thread is secure and your gathers aren't gonna go anywhere. And then we have this, and then we want to make them even. So we just pull them. Until they look even, just like that. We can throw a clip. All right, same thing with this end of the threads. Do a figure 8 around your pin, just to lock them in place. And it also allows the gathers to go all the way to the pin, just like that. Now that we got the main fabric all gathered and put to the bodice, we're gonna go ahead and take the underskirt and do the same thing, matching the side seams and the front, and then we're gonna pull these together, and then we're gonna pin them together. Now that we have that all gathered and attached to the skirt, we're gonna go and we're gonna sew all the way around using our seam allowance. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you like my channel, please subscribe. I would love to have you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.